Ladies and gentlemen, we are pleased to welcome Robert Blue, President and CEO of Dominion Energy, for a fireside chat with the Honorable Paul Dabbar, co-founder and CEO of Bohr Quantum Technology.
All right, well, it's great to be here on this topic. It's something that Bob and I talk about a lot. I had the opportunity to be on the board of directors of Dominion, and this topic of AI and energy is a very regular topic. We were just visiting one of the over 90 data centers in Loudoun County 2 days ago, and looking at one of the substations, a little bit over 300 megawatts, and I think there's over 30 of them in Loudoun County.
Right.
So this is a very topical point. So I'll start with probably the biggest of the questions, which is about generation and source of power. Obviously, given the Dominion service territory in Northern Virginia is by far the largest supplier of data centers, over 90.
Yes.
4 gigawatts, give or take, growing about 1 gigawatt a year. That's a lot, and so it's by far the largest in the world of any place. So this is the kind of the center. I think we're lucky to have Bob here to talk about that driver. So let's start with a conversation about generation and resources. Obviously, you have a tremendous amount of growth with AI, a very large part of it. Virginia overall is doing obviously quite well, but that's certainly a large component of it. And you have to balance a whole state, or more than a whole state, as you think about this one particular driver. So, Bob, how do you think about the generation growth mix, what you have to go build, all the different pressures around that building generation of different types? How do you balance all that?
Yeah, that's a great question. First, thanks to SCSP for letting me participate and having my interrogator be a member of our board. That's comforting. That he asks hard questions in the boardroom, but maybe when we're in public, it'll be a little bit easier. Now, I'm a little nervous to talk about resource adequacy and new generation because I just heard Neil Chatterjee say CEOs shouldn't be involved in resource adequacy. I thought that's what I heard him say. Only nerds should be allowed to do it. But we have a lot of smart people at Dominion Energy who can help out. So as Paul said, we're headquartered in Richmond, Virginia. We're the utility that serves large part of Virginia and then a chunk of South Carolina. We also own some merchant nuclear in Connecticut. But the interesting thing about our company, for purposes of this conference, is we are the largest, we serve the largest data center market in the world in Loudoun County, Virginia. It is larger than the next 4 internationally combined. Last year, roughly 24% of the electricity that we sold in Virginia was to data centers. So we have a long history with data centers. This topic of energy use and AI and technology and data centers has sort of come on to the public consciousness over the course of the last year or so. But this is something that we've been doing for a while. So let me talk a little bit when I talk about our energy mix. Let me talk a little bit about where we used to be, where we are today, and where we're headed. So if you go back to when I started Dominion Energy in 2005, about half of the electricity that we generated was from coal. And about 30% was nuclear and just a tiny little bit from natural gas and sort of hydro and oil. Fast forward to today, nuclear is still in that 30% range, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But now natural gas is about 40%, and coal is less than 10%. So we've seen this significant shift, and this is true across a lot of the industry, but particularly true at our company, from coal to natural gas. That was driven a little bit by environmental regulations, but mostly by economics. Just natural gas became cheap in the United States and comparatively. And so we built at Dominion Energy in the last decade several very large, very efficient combined cycle natural gas plants. That has changed our emissions profile at our company. We've reduced our carbon emissions by more than 50% since 2005 because of that shift from coal to natural gas. And we were already, in terms of, you think about our carbon emissions intensity, we were already in a pretty good spot because of that significant nuclear generation that we had. So we were heavily coal and nuclear. We moved to heavily now natural gas and nuclear, and where we're headed is renewables, nuclear, and still some natural gas. Our changes going forward are being driven in part by policy and in part by demand, by economics, and by customer expectations. So policy in Virginia, the state has set some pretty specific targets for us for what we need to seek approval from our regulators in order to build generation. The law was passed in 2020 and basically provides that over the 15-year period after 2020, we need to build or seek to build about 16 gigawatts of solar, 5 gigawatts of offshore wind, 2.5 or so gigawatts of storage. So that's what the law is telling us to do. But we also need to ramp up our generation capacity because of extreme demand growth. So we're seeing demand growth, and this is true across the industry, but more so, I think, at our company because the data center concentration here. We're seeing demand growth going forward at a rate that we really haven't seen in this country since after World War II. Demand for the last 20 years nationally has been roughly flat, and now take the area where we're the transmission provider in Virginia, so not just where we have retail customers, but also we're the transmission provider for electrical co-ops and some municipal systems, so they call it the DOM zone within PJM. The projection is peak demand growth of about 5 to 5.5% per year for the next 10 or 15 years. That's pretty extraordinary growth. So we're going to need more generation. What's it going to look like? Well, let's start with, we need to keep those nuclear units that we have today operating. They were built in the 1970s. They have been licensed initially for 40 years, then they got extensions for another 20. And now at Dominion Energy, at the units, we have 4 nuclear units in Virginia, 2 at North End and 2 at Surrey. They've received licensed extensions to go from 60 to 80 years. So they're going to be operating into the 2050s. By the way, the only 2 plants in the country so far that have received that license extension, although others will get them very soon. There is no chance that our company, that our country is going to meet our carbon-free targets if we do not keep the existing nuclear fleet operating. And so it's important to note that it may not seem that exciting, but it's incredibly important. We're going to need to build a lot of renewables. In our case, we are constructing the largest offshore wind project under construction in the world. It's a 2.6 gigawatt project. It's the largest renewable project under construction in the country today. That project is going extremely well. You read about challenges with offshore wind around the sort of northeast and mid-Atlantic. For us, our project has gone very well. It's 176 turbines, 27 miles off the coast Virginia Beach. We've installed 78 of the foundations so far, and we're on track to have that project done by the end of 2026. We're building a substantial amount of solar. As I mentioned, the law calls for us to do that. In 2013, our company had operated no solar, and now we have 9 gigawatts of solar either in operation or under development. We're going to need more natural gas generation as well, and this is something that I think folks are grappling with quite a bit. We do not have the ability to serve the load that's coming reliably without more natural gas. It gives us the ability to operate our system when we're adding in a lot of intermittent renewables. So we're going to need to do some more natural gas. We have announced plans for some peaking natural gas, and we may need some more. And then looking beyond that, as we think about non-intermittent, non-emitting sources of energy, in our case, there's the possibility of additional nuclear. That would be, in all likelihood, through small modular nuclear reactors. We have sort of put them in our long-range plan, starting, the first one would be in 2034, but we got a long ways to go to get from here to there in terms of choosing a technology and figuring out the appropriate financing and cost risk sharing with all of that. So our customers, the data center customers that we've been talking about, the technology customers that we've been talking about, they have substantial demand and they have expectations of us to be as clean as we possibly can. And so we're working with them and we're working with our regulators to add to the resource mix today to serve that load that's coming at us. This is what we do. We're very proud of our reputation for reliability. We're very proud of our ability to meet customer demand. We're highly confident that we're going to be able to do it going forward, but it's something very different than what our industry has been experiencing over the course of the last 20 years or so. The last part I would mention on this a little bit is there are technological challenges when you add in all these intermittent resources. The sun doesn't always shine. Take the last 5 days in this neck of the woods. The solar that we have today, which over the course of a year we would expect to operate about 22% of the time, it's operating at a third of that capacity. So battery storage is good. It's very helpful for 4 hours. Longer duration storage is really critical, and so we're piloting a 100-hour battery that we've announced plans for that we would expect to have in service in 2026. So those technological challenges are there. There's some policy challenges ahead of us, but we're really at a very transformative phase in our industry, and a lot of it is thanks to changes that are coming from the demands from technology, AI, and data centers generally.
So Bob, you just listed through an incredibly wide breadth of resources that you're
all ones that our
adding.
nerds are figuring out,
right,
not me.
Yes,
just to be clear, Neil.
They're physicists,
exactly,
right? Like Neil said, we should only have
exactly.
physicists making those decisions. A very wide breadth of types. Quantum, which is of megawatts, which is hard to completely get your hands around. It's so much of 9,000 of solar and the largest wind project, and put an SMR bid out the door. There's another angle to all this, which is the regulatory, public policy, market,
yes.
PJM
Yes.
challenges, right? You're building things in a lot of different locations, some of which are new locations.
Yes.
And you have a lot of different public policy, markets, regulatory, sometimes very local issues. In Loudoun County, there's over 30 substations, sometimes 300 megawatts each. like the one that we visited here a couple of days ago. These are very large things to be built in a local community. Could you comment to the challenges in the managing of those kind of markets, regulation, approvals to execute on all of that?
Yeah, when I was talking about all of those ways that our generation mix is transforming, I didn't even mention transmission, which is a huge aspect of this. So at our company, our 5-year capital plan, we expect over the next 5 years to invest about $35 billion. About $12 billion of that is in electric transmission alone. So when you think about the amount of projects associated with that are going to need to be permitted and approved, and most people don't like having an electric transmission line in their neighborhood or across their farm or in their community, understandably so. There are challenges associated with trying to get those things permitted, and we're fine. And by the way, Virginia historically has been a very efficient state for permitting, thorough and challenging, but one where sort of my view of permitting is it should be extremely thorough, it should be hard, it should have a defined beginning and a defined end, and those two things shouldn't be necessarily too far apart. Virginia has historically been very good at that, but as political pressure goes up, the challenges get greater, the time period for permitting gets longer. Longer permitting means more expense for projects, which ultimately raises the cost for everyone. So what we're particularly seeing now is local permitting is becoming more challenging, and all of the sort of normal environmental permits that we have to go through are taking a little bit longer. It is incumbent upon us, if we're asking for a permitting process to be efficient, that we need to communicate well. And so as we add more projects, we need to be better and better at getting out in front and talking to communities and figuring out the ways that we can, to the greatest extent possible, reduce the impact on our communities of the infrastructure that we need to build. And we need to make sure that we're thinking about communities across the areas where we are doing our work, that no one community is being overly burdened, and that no one community is getting all of the benefits. So it's incumbent upon us to think about that, and we're getting, I think we've always been pretty good at that. We're getting better and better because the permitting challenges are getting greater and greater. Besides permitting, given the length of time that the projects we're building are intended to last, some consistency in policy is very valuable. Changing direction dramatically is pretty tough on us because we're trying to plan 15, 20, 40 years ahead.
Well, we had an opportunity for 2 questions.
I'm sorry, I filibustered a bit.
But one thing that I would say that we heard also when we were visiting data centers here a couple of days ago for work was also the importance of cost of the power to the customer.
Yes.
And I think sometimes that gets missed. And we heard Eric Schmidt say that data centers around the world are looking for cheap energy, right? When he was talking about the Middle East and the UAE maybe doing that. And as we heard, one of the big data center providers, their economic model was they made revenues based on kilowatt hours sold to each customer. And so keeping costs also very low for the power that you deliver to them, that they deliver to their rack customers inside their buildings is also an important driver that we heard.
It's critical. It's obviously important to all our customer classes, but for us, making sure that these technological advancements are here in the United States to benefit our customers is really critical and something that we're heavily focused on.
All right. Well, thank you for imparting your leadership position globally on this portion of this AI and energy topic. Thank you very much.
Great to be part of it.